Welcome back, everybody. Tuesday, December 1st. John Eravos is here with Cliff Schecter and Malcolm Nance.
Returning champion.
Returning champion. That's right. This is our third time having Malcolm back. Today, who knows? Maybe things will be less apocalyptic. Who knows?
Wait, what?
I said maybe things will be less apocalyptic talk. Well, every time we talk,
yeah, when we had you on the past, it was sort of like, will this country survive the next year kind of conversations. So, I don't know long term, but at least I have to assume it looks slightly better now.
Well, wait, let me tell people who Malcolm is, because some of our British friends may not know. The Americans do. Malcolm Nance is a former intelligence author. Well, you are a former intelligence author and officer. New York Times best-selling author, MSNBC contributor. His most recent book is The Plot to Betray America, which is now out in paperback. And are you working on anything new you want to tell folks about before we delve into the substance?
Actually, I'm two books deep. One,
the man's always writing a book.
Well, in fact, I did not ever want to write another book about Trump. I really didn't. I had 3 books of the Plot series: Plot to Hack America, Plot to Destroy Democracy, and now Plot to Betray America. And people were like, oh, you got to do another one. I'm like, no, never again. And then as we were coming into the run-up to the election, I was just seeing so many terrible things that were happening with the way that Trump supporters were starting to talk. And they were using what we call eliminationist rhetoric. And so
we just heard it from... Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm not doing another Plot to book. But it's a book about right-wing extremism and what I call the coming Titus, Titus, which is the Trump insurgency in the United States. That Donald Trump and his followers are going to be pretty much like Saddam Hussein in Iraq in 2003. They're all going to go underground, and they'll do a very low-grade political military insurgency.
Yeah, I mean, look, we just heard... this might have been yesterday, Joe DeGeneva, one of those lunatic Fox, lawyers who is on Trump's side. What did he say? We should execute Chris Krebs, the former head of election security and Homeland Security. Literally used that phrase.
He said drawn and quartered, and that he should be taken out at dawn and shot. What
do we do with people like that?
Well, what you're watching is something which I saw when the Hutus were about to massacre the Tutsis in Rwanda back in the late 1980s. But as an intelligence guy, and at that time I was actually supporting sub-Saharan African operations and the U.S. embassy down there, and we were seeing what we call eliminationist rhetoric. This is words and behaviors which are indicating how they're viewing their opposition. And at that time, we were, they had their national radio channel, Radio Milcolin, which was saying, your neighbors don't deserve to live. They're not humans. They're they're animals. They're monkeys. They're cockroaches.
Cockroaches was the one I remember.
Cockroaches was the big one.
So that's the thing. I want to say this quickly. I'll let you jump in, John, and obviously get back to you, Malcolm. But I often use that example on this show.
This
is one of the things I talk about
a lot. Yeah,
I do with Fox, because when people say, oh, the answer to free speech is more free speech. And my answer is not when it comes to this stuff, is that when you get people, Hutus and Tutsis, the Tutsis had been favored by the French when they were there. There was ancient enmity between them. I'm not an intelligence guy like you, but I am an international affairs background and a history guy. And what you have suddenly is these folks are neighbors with each other, but the talk radio programming starts saying they're cockroaches. How many cockroaches did you kill today for your country? And the precipitating event are these conspiracies around a plane crash and a head of state who was Hutu being. So that's my question for you is, we've always had these institutions that were supposed to prevent that radicalization. We're not preventing it anymore. How do we stop from becoming that?
Let me ask as well, Malcolm.
Sure.
Do we need, I'm playing around with as you guys talk, I get to play around with who's highlighted. So it takes me a second to figure, it's like I'm my own producer here. At the same time, do we even need to worry about such things? Is America unique? do we not have the threat of the kind of violence we had in Rwanda in America? So I wanted to put that as a precursor to Cliff's question. And if what the hell do we do about it?
Before I answer the obvious answer that no, America is not like Rwanda and we aren't going to go out and start massacring our neighbors, I often think back to a period that culminated somewhere around 1860, where in fact we did that very thing. We not only took up arms against each other, all of the American institutions severed and split. I mean, right down to, the commandant of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point was a Colonel Robert E. Lee at the time. And he left, abandoned his post, took all the Southern soldiers with him, and formed an army to commit treason against the Constitution of the United States. So, I can't say that would there ever be a circumstance where this nation would fracture. But let me tell you something. I know that for a very long time, somewhere around 5 years, the media hoi polloi, a lot of the journalists who were Glenn Greenwald followers, and there's this whole class of what I call bro journalists, right? Journalist bros, whatever you want to call them, who became over time. They were like the Snowden lover, Assange lover, and the entire Trump-Russia scandal, where Russia actually hacked not just the Democratic Party, but the mindset of the American public, using, information warfare as the vehicle to create a disinformation bubble around America that sucked in 40% of the nation, 60, and then it magnified the insanity from their preferred candidate. And for a very long time, I had these guys really soundly criticize me for writing these books, saying, what we all see now, or what we were seeing with our very eyes at the time, saying things like, oh, well, that couldn't possibly have happened, and you're a conspiracy theorist. For a very long time, we had people calling us, conspiracy theorists. And even though I was the first person in U.S. media to call the Russian operation an attack on the United States in real time, and then 2 days later, Donald Trump called on Russia to hack and release Hillary's emails as if to prove it, we still have these people I call, Trump-Russia deniers. They Trump-Russia truthers, people who still, mainstream journalists don't believe that it really happened or it didn't happen the way that people see it. And the reason I mention this is I got into a pretty, an interesting email battle with Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stones, who I didn't know had been in Russia in the wild 90s and was out there, clubbing and hoeing and doing whatever, according to his own writing.
According to his own book, forcing women into uncompromising positions. But
I don't know about that. All I knew at the time was this was Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone. I had respected his work. And one day he wrote to me and he said, well, where do you get all this stuff? Right? How do you come off with all this? Where do you get this theory that Russia had a strategy to attack the United States? And this is very important. And I said, it's interesting. I said, is this an interview? You could contact me. We could do an interview. But he was really hot. I mean, he was really super angry.
Taking it personally.
But that's the way, that's all those bros. That's the way they're always angry.
I know.
It's like their thing.
Bros.
Right.
And so he was just, because one, I'm famous for going on air all the time and saying, I'm not a journalist. Okay. Yeah, I have 4 New York Times bestsellers in a row, but I'm not a journalist.
Just saying.
I'm an intelligence officer who is doing analyses and giving you these warnings way in advance of the news media.
You read the tea leaves.
Yeah,
well, because this is what you're trained in. You know how to look for certain signals and certain signs, and you're good at it. So,
but I'm looking for things that journalists would not be looking for.
Right.
Correct.
Right? You guys are looking to have an interview with a guy that will tell you that there's a pinpoint of light out there.
So what happened? Yeah, what happened with the discussion?
So what happened with him is he goes, well, you're saying that the Russians have a strategy to influence the American minds and said that they could take over the take over a population without firing a shot. Interestingly enough, I had said that on MSNBC with Brian Williams.
Right.
Fox News, Tucker Carlson, the next night ridiculed it as if they had never heard of the Trump-Russia scandal.
Yeah.
And then
as if Russia has no interest whatsoever in influencing American public opinion.
Or Western Europe, or they don't do any of this stuff.
That's insane. I mean,
and this is 2019, by the way. This is 2017 or 2018. This is 2019. It was well established. Right. And so I said, well, the Russians said it. They've done studies of this. They have a doctrine called the Gerasimov Doctrine, which is named after the chief of staff of the Russian armed forces, who actually had a strategy where they said they would use information, the power of the internet, to influence target audiences and populations in such a way that they could remove a nation's sovereignty without firing a shot.
Right.
Yep.
And so Matt Taibbi goes, where did you get that? Who told you that? Where did you get this? And I go, and I realized, this is a hostile interview.
Where did you get that?
Well, go spend $28.95 and you can go buy my book, Plot to Destroy Democracy, where the Russians pretty much say it outright. And he goes, no, I need your source. You coming out and writing this? And I go, well, there were studies. And he goes, well, this is like saying the Rand Corporation writes a study and suddenly it's policy. I go, we're under attack.
Right. I mean, well, let me say this for quickly, Malcolm, because this is what's so frustrating, right? There was a point in time, and I admit this I'm embarrassed by it now, but, I wrote a book on John McCain, a bestseller too, by the way, not for like you. I'll be clear. You still got me. But back in 2008, and I was going to do a book event at that point in time that was planned with Paul Waldman, who's over at who writes for the Washington Post for Plumline, Arianna Huffington, everybody's heard of her, and a guy named Glenn Greenwald, the guy on the left at the time who seemed like a legitimate person on the left. And since that time, he's delved into such, it's not, conspiracy doesn't even do it justice. Like the gaslighting of the point where he will look in the face, he will put again and again and again and act like you're the one, you being anybody else is crazy on Twitter to believe there was quote unquote collusion, as in the most base sort of definition of the word collusion, Donald Trump Jr. sitting in Trump Tower, taking a meeting with a Russian spy doesn't fulfill that, right? Whatever they successfully pulled off, they certainly were working together on some level. And he and Taibbi and all these guys. So let me ask you this, and I'll let you go from here. This is the Russian model. If you look at, as we know, we look at what they've done in France, what they've done in the UK. They get these figures who were once on the far left, as well as the far right, to come together and support their conspiracies. Is that what we're seeing here? Yes,
and the Germans have a name for it, right? If you read it, the first real politician from the West who they did this with, the Russians did this, which is essentially bought their loyalty with money, right? With oligarch money, was Gerhard Schroeder, the former German chancellor of Germany. And the Germans actually call this buying Western politicians to become spokesmen for the Russian presidency and oligarchy. They call it Schroederization, right? Schroederization.
Oh my God.
It's going to be called Trumpization here very soon.
It should.
But Schroeder was not the first one. He was just the highest level one.
Wasn't Willy
Here
Brandt
are some
also
of the other ones
up there?
Galloway, right?
He was chancellor.
Yeah,
he was
Brandt,
the president of Germany.
Yeah.
And in the 1980s, right? He was head of a NATO country. And then, Russian money essentially bought him to where he became this lover of Germany, of Russia, and, wanting to get money off gas pipelines. Then they started going after popular figures. Two of my favorites, Steven Seagal and Gerard Depardieu, right?
Oh, they got him too?
I didn't even know about Depardieu. I knew Seagal, but oh my God.
Depardieu and Seagal are Russian citizens.
Oh God.
David Duke too, right? They bought him to move over there for a while too.
No.
Well, David Duke has an apartment there, but they got all of three of the separatist movements in the United States. Wow. The Northwest Territory separatists, the Texas separatists, and this crazy guy who's like a Southern secessionist. And all of these things are communists. This is how the Soviet Union used to take, lackeys and hirelings and bring them over and make them go on television. But
it's almost like Putin served in the Soviet Union in some capacity or something, right?
I hear people tell me this all the time. I actually heard a person say, Vladimir Putin is not a communist. Okay. I am a U.S. intelligence officer. I came into the military in 1980, right? In the mid-Cold War, or the last decade of the Cold War. And it was hot. That Cold War was very hot. Everything we were trained in was identifying KGB operations. I was a Middle East guy. KGB was everywhere. Right. Get off a boat in Naples, KGB. Go to Cyprus, KGB. Do a port visit in Egypt, KGB working with Egyptian intelligence. Syria, they were a global threat. But now we have all these people here who are saying, well, since 1990, they weren't communists. Vladimir Putin at age 13, according to his own biography, went to a KGB open house and asked them, how do I join KGB? And
is that like pledging a frat or no?
What's that?
Is that like pledging a fraternity? Like you go and an open house?
Beer bomb.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. Go ahead.
Believe me, what's really crazy is that this guy was a career KGB officer, and it was the Soviet Union that collapsed, not his loyalty to communism.
Also, Mel, first of all, weren't you the one that told the story about how they, something about the name changing on the KGB and how it's the same building?
That's true.
Well, tell people that. It was a good example.
The KGB became the FSB. And Putin was not the first post-Soviet director of intelligence, but it was so it was disintegrating. People were literally bringing truckloads of top secret documents to the Americans. So when Putin took over as the director of the FSB, the building, he literally went back to Lubyanka prison. The original NKVD KGB headquarters, resurrected it, including the furnace in the basement that they throw you into if they catch you as a traitor.
Right.
And but here's the thing about Putin. Right. He reestablished the FSB with all old KGB hands. And the only difference was he quintupled their budget every year. Right. And now they have all the technological prowess of the West. And here's the kicker: right next door was a Russian Orthodox church that, of course, had been used for interrogations and abuse for over 70 years. This guy renovated it with KGB money, and he tied religious orthodoxy to loyalty of the nation in espionage.
He embraced the sort of populism that the far right here embraced, and by becoming anti-Semitic, anti-gay, pro-church, pro-Russian greatness, expansion.
Those are the two arms that brought the right wing to the Russians. The preservation of Christianity conferences that Franklin Graham was leading over there. He became
been doing massive religious right outreach as well. Yep.
Right.
The NRA, as we know, I wrote one of the first pieces in the Daily Beast before Butina was busted. I wrote the first piece, I think, that looked at David Clark and these guys who were going over there and
David
why are
Clark's
these people
trip to Russia?
Right.
Look, why these are
all this? Malcolm, let me go ahead. One thing that
was old school.
But there's also it's a bit of a red herring as well. It drives me nuts when I hear, and you're right, it's the same sort of liberal or whatever they are, far left apologists who say
alt left.
What's funny? I used to call them alt left, and it used to piss people off, but it's a great term.
Alt left.
And people would get pissed. People would say, "Oh, they're not communist anymore," and I'm kind of like, "So what?" But you know what I mean? So what if they're not? It's, as you say, it's the same damn KGB building. It's the same people running the place. So they've changed the name of the restaurant, but they're serving the same food.
Exactly.
But I don't.
If they're still in favor of expansion, if they're still discriminating, they're still a police state.
Who cares what the ideology is? They fake embraced communism before, and now they're fake embracing. Well, they're not even fake. Now they're just embracing authoritarianism. But it's such a red herring.
It doesn't matter which bullshit line you're hiding behind. What they're embracing is authoritarianism, plutocracy.
But it's the bullshit of our side is what I'm saying. It's the bullshit of the extreme left here, though, Cliff, that bothers me. Because
they say it's McCarthyism, and you're just like, what are you fucking talking about?
Who cares if they're communist? They're bad people.
The hallmark of this, you know that you've reached your pinnacle when you get what's commonly known in the Urban Dictionary as greenwalded. Right? That's when Greg Greenwald writes an article about you, turns that article into a personal attack in order to degrade you so that everybody goes, oh, you're not legitimate. He did that to me.
We're trying to earn our way. John and I we've both been singled out in tweets and called example of the liberal hypocrisy and evil and by Glenn, but I really want to work further so he can turn into an article.
You and Neera Tandon are at the top of Glenn's list. Cliff and I are, we're not worthy.
We're the B list of Glenn, who Glenn hates.
Here, I got one last thing I got to say about that. Right. Look, here's why. I worked at the National Security Agency, right? There were programs I swore my life I would die before I would ever open my mouth about them.
Right.
And this guy's like, no, screw it. Send it out to the world. Everybody needs to know about this. The little old ladies and old guys at NSA work a thankless job. And they are not the man. They're not reading your emails. They don't have time, right? These people just want to make sure you don't get killed, right? So
I appreciate that, my leaders.
Oh, I'm going to help somebody commit treason.
What do you think is going on with Glenn? And
you know what?
Keep it legal here as far as
do you in your but this is what Malcolm does, and this is what he did for years, is look at the signs and come to and say, no, I don't have proof, but come to a determination. Because my question has been, is he just a useful idiot, or is your determination? I'll give you this.
Just let Malcolm.
He went on a trip over to Moscow with Snowden, and Snowden had a lot of stuff on him. Would they have not been watching his every move? Because I talked to John quick, and I'll say quickly, one time when I went for USIA to the State Department and they sent me to Bucharest, you can be sure in that room, in that hotel, I knew that they had those damn cameras on me, and every single thing I did, I was like, I'm going to be, purer than Caesar, right? So what do you think they got?
By the way, Edward Snowden lives in an FSB safe house. His lawyer is an FSB lawyer. He has 24-hour FSB protection. All right? He is essentially a defector. Right. And, I'm not going to say anything about what would motivate Glenn Greenwald, because who knows? The alt-left and the alt-right are essentially the same thing. This guy spends more time on Fox News. But this is the same person who said MSNBC is working in league with the CIA because Malcolm Nance mistakenly said that Jill Stein had a Russia Today television program. I later learned she didn't. But she was on so damn much.
You made the mistake, honestly, because she was always on.
You should have said de facto.
And they're like, you're part of a world that's out as part of the CIA.
Why do you hate Russia so much?
Yeah, why do you hate Russia so much? Look, if I
You damn deep stater.
No, but that's what's going on
with
these guys.
They're not going to bring me into this administration, but I've said this very clearly. There needs to be a new Cold War. There is going to be a clash of civilizations here, of ideologies between oligarchy and democracy. We thought it would have been communism, but now we find that it's a rich form of fascism. Right. And what did Mussolini call fascism, right? He called it a dictatorship of the corporate right. Well, here we are.
What do you mean by
almost took over our nation?
What do you mean we need to have a Cold War? What do you mean?
I think that there needs to be a strategic confrontation between the ideologies. And that means we have to reestablish all of our allies and make it clear that, first off, I am a big proponent of punishing Russia. You cannot take a shot at American democracy openly by an ex-KGB officer and expect to get away with that. Right. I've been advocating this for the last 4 years.
What does that look like to you? How would you punish them?
Money. Go around the world and start vacuum cleaning their money up. Look, I worked at the National Security Agency. If given the right go-ahead to the U.S. Treasury, we could just seize money if we wanted to, right? I'd take every illicit dollar. I'd make sure every one of their mega yachts are impounded or seized by SEAL Team 6.
Who particularly? But who particularly? The leaders or the oligarchs supporting Putin?
All of the Russian oligarchy. I'd seize their assets in the United
oligarchs
States.
Are the leaders, John. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's so incestuous that.
Well, but I'm just asking you to explain more. So are you saying that you think the oligarchs would then put pressure on Putin, or what do you think would happen?
Oh,
they get pissed off.
As far as I'm concerned, I want to be paid for the pain that they put this nation through attempting to smash 244 years of democracy.
Yeah.
Putin does not allow them to exist, all right, without his go-ahead. He has staff on all of their staffs. He has ex-FSB and KGB officers on all of their staffs. They are the ecosystem in which Russia's, richest people stay rich. There's a way around that. Right. And I'm not joking about seizing all of their mega yachts.
But what is I guess I'm asking you, though, what is the practical impact? I was devil's advocating because I don't think the oligarchs
the practical impact is that we'll show the world that you come and take a shot at us.
Right.
There's going to be hard financial problems. I mean,
will it teach the Russians that lesson, too? I mean, is there any chance of doing this, of them going once burned, twice shy? They go, OK, next time. Well, the oligarchs won't want it to happen again.
No, the oligarchs won't want it to happen again, but, they're the people who are going to have to go to Putin and say, hey, the Americans just stole $30 billion from me, or my boat just got seized in Marseille. But what's that?
Will they go to Putin and say that? I thought they'd be afraid of him.
Well, you know what? When you get every rich person in Russia starts losing their money, this is the whole reason why Donald Trump is president. He's a guy who could be bought. He's a guy who would allow them to play in the world and sanctions be danged. Look, I was on an intelligence operation, or supported an intelligence operation in which a terrorist was bought onto a yacht off of Cyprus. Right? Little did he know, we had seized that yacht. And the moment he stepped onto it, he was actually on a commissioned U.S. Navy warship.
Oops.
But those, the women with no tops on who were DEA officers,
oh, God.
This guy didn't know he had screwed up. Until literally he was being winched onto a U.S. helicopter, landed onto a U.S. aircraft carrier, then flown nonstop to Andrews Air Force Base.
Right.
That's the way we are going to have to play with the people that funded this attack on the United States. Granted, Joe Biden won't want to do that. It would take something precipitating for the United States to really go after him. But if somebody were to call me in and ask my opinion, I'd say this thing needs to go. We need to go back to 1962 with Russia. We need to start confronting them everywhere.
Well, no matter what we do,
Angola.
Right. I mean, look, I said, whatever we decide to do, this is pretty simple stuff, right? This is going back to on crime and punishment kind of stuff, which is if the reaction to somebody committing an act like that is, it can't be immediate at this point, but if it's not, it can't be swift, but it can be certain and it can be severe still of those three Cs, we got to do something or why would they not do it again? If we
Hillary Clinton said in the run up to the election in 2016 that she would consider Russia's act of cyber, operations as an act of terrorism, on par with a major act of terrorism. And of course, a lot of people will say, well, you've got to get a legal basis for this. Russian oligarchs buy American lawyers by the gross now. Okay. And they understand you want to screw with the United States, go into the courts. Right. I would do is I would work with Congress if we got a Democratic Senate, and I would do what the British did, which is sort of this global Magnitsky Act, and where your unexplained wealth is seizable. It's as simple as that. You come into the United States, we're going to audit the heck out of you. If you're tied to global, oligarchs and money that came from the liquidation of the Soviet Union, then the United States government is going to own itself 4,000 apartments in New York City.
Right, because a bunch of these guys are U.S. citizens who came here when they were young, and they have ties to Putin, and we know that. And so,
and I think it's awesome because then they should be well aware of the consequences of having taken part or assisted or facilitated or exercised influence in an attack on the United States. And they better become key players to helping us find the resources and assets of a global dictator, or they are going to find out just what U.S. courts are for. There just cannot be a kumbaya. Let's just let Russia get away with what they did. They'll do it again. They'll start
That's
going
the point.
down. Yeah, they'll start going down to dog catcher level,
but
putting people in and Biden, facilitating QAnon and the Trump insurgency, to where Russia has been pulling their strings for the last 4 years.
But don't you think Russia, of course, Russia will do all of this again. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. Don't you think Russia will cross the line again? It is only inevitable that Russia will cross the line again and Biden will be forced to act.
Look, Russia has crossed the line. What we need to do is there's two areas where we need to operate. You can go black, or you can go gray, or you can do it white. I say we start with the black, right? Whoever the next director of the CIA or the director of national intelligence, I would just make it clear that identifying oligarch assets and all of the personnel that took part in the 2016 information warfare operation on the United States should become global top priorities. I'd be going full Jason Bourne on them, in the sense that not Jason Bourne going out on them, but
that would be fun.
You spool up the whole agency, right? To say, hey, I need full asset coverage on these people. And the Treasury Department, I'd have an entire wing of those guys, and Justice Department lawyers
tracing down their funds,
down their funds, issue subpoenas, and say we're seizing them as assets of a international continuing criminal enterprise. RICO, those
Malcolm
guys.
Nance, Russia czar. I see it now.
Oh my God, they would fear me.
The irony in and of itself of a Russia czar, you have to enjoy.
Yeah, I know.
But it's only for vengeance. Well, justice, not vengeance, but yeah.
Well, I mean, that's my thought. Like, I mean, look, you can argue for all of us some of it's vengeance, and I mean, for what they've done to us. But the more important part to me is the justice part, is the looking at we need to prevent this shit in the future and what's going on right now. And if we don't make it clear that there's a punishment, a price to be paid for everything they're doing, I mean, I wonder how many members of Congress they own at this point. I mean, who knows what
we're going to find out soon.
It was suspect that. And I would like to know your opinion on this. Like, I mean, there are plenty of folks who have claimed that QAnon itself is a Russian op. It's just a disinformation op to fuck us up. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
it's too inherently American. And the whole idea. I monitor right-wing extremists online, and I read their stuff. I get up at 4 a.m. I start reading The Morning Crazy, and these
you're a lot of fun, aren't you? In bed.
Oh my God.
It's 4 a.m. Malcolm, turn off the QAnon.
Well, this is the only place it pays to be a widower. My wife, who still speaks in my ear all the time, she watched me watch these people.
Would you actually do that to her? You'd get up at 4 a.m. and start reading your stuff, and she'd be like, honey, what are you doing?
She did.
Morning.
Well, fortunately, I would get up. My wake up time is 3:30 in the morning, and that means I can go get all my work done before 7 in the morning. But like I was saying, that when you monitor these people and you see the crazy that's going on around Sidney Powell right now, Kraken, the Kraken,
bring the Kraken.
This story that SEAL Team 6 went to Germany to seize the fake voter roll logs from the CIA.
Yeah,
wow.
Didn't they do that at the direction of Hugo Chavez, who's been dead for 7 years?
Oh my God! They're saying Gina Haspel and Ray and FBI. I don't even get part of this.
I don't even get the theory, because I kept listening to them and I'm going, wait, there was one computer in Germany that had the real results of the whole election? How does that even work? What does that even mean?
You have to it's a cartoon movie version of things. And the beautiful part is, what was it? 5 weeks ago, they were the government. Yeah, America, rah, rah, rah. Now the government is, according to their own writings, is the enemy now. Right? The deep state is now taking over an entire election and is trying to defeat Donald Trump, and Trump is fighting them. And we now have to get our guns to defeat them.
Right.
This is where we delve into craziness, but it's an indigenous American crazy that's happening here. And Donald Trump, with the amplification of the Russians, because, in this election, the Russians didn't have to do anything. Donald Trump did it all. And that amplification took place internally. So these people have literally the Gerasimov doctrine of seizing a nation's sovereignty by changing the mindset of a foreign population to where you are now their savior and ally has taken place with Donald Trump. Yeah. These people are ready to fight, by the way. And the QAnon stuff, that stuff is so widespread. And this is the premise of my next book. That stuff is so widespread, it will become the main ideology of the Republican Party in the next year.
Wow. It's funny, Malcolm, because I was wondering when you were coming on, I was saying to Cliff, are we going to have more doom and gloom, or is Malcolm just going to be happy now? I guess you're not happy yet, are you, Malcolm?
No one's going to be happy with what's coming.
Yeah, no, and I'm quite serious, because the thing is, it always made me laugh, because you would get a few of those naysayers, but, everything you said about Russia, everything you said about Trump. Now, I will say this. They're such good liars, the Republicans, though, I mean, I know. And we talk about this all the time, but think of how many times they talk about how the Russia probe was a hoax and how it proved Trump was innocent. But almost every day they bring this out. How often on our side do we talk about, well, actually, we found a lot of stuff with Russia, including Donald Trump's own son agreed to collude with the Russians for election help. That fact.
You know what? And
we suck at this, don't we? A little bit.
We do, because we're normal, rational human beings with things to do in our life. These people that I monitor in Parler, Gab, Wemo, all these crazy chat sites of there, they're nuts. The problem is that nuts is now in the mainstream media. And every time there's one guy, I saw this in a forum, and this one guy goes, hey, listen, they certified all these results. It's a done deal. All we can do is try to support Trump for 2024. Immediately, a huge group of people came out and was like, you're a sheeple. You're obviously watching the liberal media. It's not over by a long shot. You got to watch OANN. And I realized they stay within this echo chamber of theirs in order not to be exposed to any other reality.
Well, but and it's worse than that, though, because, look, a lot of people watch MSNBC, okay? And MSNBC, the nightly shows on MSNBC, the nightly shows are liberal, right? Now, there's a marked difference because Rachel and Chris don't lie. They've got a bias. I say a bias. They've got their perspective. They come from a lefty
they have their opinion.
But their opinion, I mean, they come from a lefty perspective, but they don't lie. And it's obviously different. I mean, what worries me is I'm still shocked. I asked you the Rwanda question as a softball, but only halfway joking about, is America like Rwanda? I never thought this stuff would work here. I never thought you could just lie to people and you'd get 47% of the vote. I never thought you could kill 265,000 Americans and you'd get 47% of the vote. There is nothing these people can't lie about. There's nothing they can't do and then lie about that 47% of Americans aren't going to say, you know what?
Would you call it like a psyop, like what right-wing media is?
It's not a psyop. See, a psyop requires a targeted, scheduled narrative, right? Where you know what you're going to do and you understand how you're changing the psychology of it. For the Russians, it was a psychological operation. It was a disinformation operation, a psychological operation which was carried via the vehicle of disinformation. And that gave you a targeted result, which was get Donald Trump elected. And that would benefit the Russian Federation. This internally is more like a psych out op where disinformation is being used to create a cult-like bubble around these followers in order to go after a targeted result, which is give us more money. Whoops, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Somebody's calling Malcolm again.
Exactly.
Yeah, from Germany, actually, a person I have who's watching the German QAnon.
It's Gerhard Schröder.
Is that where that's short? Is it because of that server you went over to Germany to get and bring back? Or?
They're going to be playing these 3 seconds of our podcast forever now. Glenn will be all over it on Tucker.
That guy. The funny thing about these people, these useful idiots, Glenn actually kept trying to goad me into saying, I dare you to call me an agent of Russia. And I said, I haven't seen you have a signed contract. That's what an actual agent is, right? Everything below that are, useful idiots, willing assets, unwilling assets, unwitting assets, witting assets. There's a whole myriad of things there. But back to your question about, is this a psychological operation? It's a psych out operation where, people have psyched themselves out, but only because Fox News, the right wing, and Donald Trump have created this bubble of information. And the psych out is when they tell you anything outside this bubble is a lie. You are literally watching communist style Kremlin propaganda of Pravda in the Soviet Union being played out with American neo-fascists.
Why does it work?
Well, it works because once you've captured the information sphere and you've created distrust in the systems that have always given you trustworthy information, you amplify and magnify messages which are pleasing to that target population.
There's certain target populations that are more susceptible, though, right? Like being older, whiter, more male, kind of.
Yeah. I got in trouble. I was on Bill Maher on the 5th of November, 2 days after the election. And it was a hard night in Los Angeles because I stayed up all Thursday night and most of Friday morning to see how it would play out. And by Friday afternoon, when I had to go on the show, it's pretty clear there's just no way Biden was going to lose. The media needs to call it. So I went on Bill Maher, and, Bill Maher was in a sort of a kumbaya mood. And, God bless him. He wants us to progress and move forward. But I said, I'm going to channel my inner Jason Johnson and Eddie Glaude here. These people are racist. And they're straight up racist. They voted for a known white supremacist. They voted for this white tribalism. They voted to cage children. They voted for this talk about apocalyptic rhetoric. They voted for
Muslim ban.
QAnon. And, that is an actual function which is identifiable. It's something that's quantifiable. It is not a feel-good, I'm just thinking this during this moment. It's something that I can say you stood up and held a ballot and marked it and said, I so choose this. So you have positively identified for me where your default is. And, the funny thing is I'm constantly bringing up parallels to the radicalization of ISIS members, of which, by the way, was another Tucker Carlson segment where they all went crazy on me because I said, these convoys that they were having, I called them vanilla ISIS convoys.
That's right.
And I said, these convoys are power projections intended to intimidate and show strength. And you know what? That kind of electioneering has gone on forever. When I was a kid, they would have the truck with a loudspeaker and music and playing around. That's great. The problem is that in the next year or so, as they get more radicalized, and based on what I'm seeing, there's a lot of mainstream people that are radicalizing. They're eventually going to start doing those convoys with weapons.
Well, I was just going to say, there's a violence to it, a violent undercurrent. Even what went on in Oregon, right? They were using their paintball guns, but I mean, they were trying to make fun of it. It's just paintball guns. You're riding by in trucks with what looks like a weapon, shooting it at people, which certainly opens you up to being shot back. Somebody doesn't know it's a paintball gun, but also a fucking paintball gun? I mean, that could hurt people.
Well, I operated in and out of Iraq over 10 years as a security and an intelligence contractor there, where I only worked with Iraqis, which is the smartest thing I ever did. When I was around Westerners, man, I was in just mortal terror of a massacre. And there were a lot of shootings that went on in Iraq that, culminated with the Blackwater shooting. They were just the highest level one. I remember one night we were in Baghdad and somebody saw a shadow and it unleashed a 5,000 rounds of ammunition at every shadow in a 360-degree radius of this hotel that we were protecting. Their mindset is they're playing this live action role play world where, they're driving around in special forces technicals and they're flying their banners like they're, the CAG, right? DevGru, or out in northern Syria, and they're all weapons forward, ready to bounce. The stuff that I saw in Western private security people over there that I was horrified from and tried to break. When I had 250 British and American private security contractors on my contract, and I was just, I took them low profile, and they were angry. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to go to guns. I see that in these people who, most of whom have never spent a day on television in the military, but they all want to play, they all want to play the super soldiers of Benghazi, or they all want to be, Black Hawk Down. And it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, I did that for almost 30 years. And believe me, I am more than happy to not have to deal with that here in the United States. But there are many of them. It's really a live action role play or cosplay with real weapons. And those paintball guns are an extension of that. I can't kill you legally right now, but I can stitch you up with 25 paintballs legally, or pepper balls.
And the dress-up games. They're wearing all their bizarro.
Right, they get together in these little militia get-togethers, and the fact that most of these guys can't walk up a flight of stairs without getting winded doesn't change the fact that they still, this is how they picture themselves, right?
That's how you get to
it is, and they all have this hero worship. If you guys have ever wondered where the beards and the bro tats and all of the body armor and stuff comes from, it comes from, I can tell you, one photograph of Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 protecting Hamid Karzai in like 2003. And that's where the guys had the beards and the bro tats and all their weapons forward. And they were, no one had seen special forces like this. And so what you're looking at is this extension of these guys, the vet bros and all the rest of these guys, thinking they want to be all, SEAL Team 6. They all want to be special forces operators. And we had lots of these guys in Iraq, and they tried, when I was in Libya, they were trying to come into Libya to establish security companies just so they could go get some. And it was just like, holy cow, I can't believe these people. What you're looking at here are people who are mimicking them, sort of in the way that people were mimicking John Wayne and the Green Berets. And
right.
It's terrible, but they're ready to kill people over this so that they can pose as super soldiers.
And it feels to me like, and again, I've written about the NRA in the past and some of the people they encourage, empower. I mean, it's a powder keg already, because we're the only Western country that allows any one of these yahoos to get their hands on an assault rifle, among other things.
Right.
They've shown up already, to events that Shannon Watts and Moms Demand Action have held. They've shown up outside with their assault rifles. I mean, they're doing plenty of this stuff where they're putting themselves in places. Think of the Bundy clan, right? To threaten people with this weaponry, and all it would take is one person shooting, and the whole thing could blow up, and you could see, a slaughter. And to think that this isn't going to happen at some point when they're being encouraged by Fox and Limbaugh and the rest of them. I mean, it's dangerous.
And they view Kyle Rittenhouse as a national hero.
Jesus
This
Christ.
guy got a $2 million bond. That's $200,000 in cash. Was put up for him to get out of jail. He's 17 years old. He borrows a gun. He goes someplace where they weren't invited, and he goes out and he starts shooting people because he felt threatened. You wouldn't have felt threatened if you hadn't been out there with a long rifle intimidating people with the intent to kill. He was just, and I'm a professional gun owner. I am a competitive shooter. I belong to gun associations, not the NRA. And I am all about safety in sport, in marksmanship.
Sure.
These people have been led to believe that they are the living embodiment of the movie Red Dawn, and that they're the Wolverines.
Well, I was going to say,
oh God.
You would not believe on all their forums, they're referring to everybody in the left as communists. Yeah. And it's like, really?
Insane.
Have you heard of Donald Trump?
I know. I haven't kept up on the level you have, but I've said to people on the show here before, like when we talk about guns and they're like, oh, you hate guns. I'm like, I have NRA medals because I used to shoot competitively on a team.
Right.
And I'll never forget one guy one summer, it was in summer camp, pointed an unloaded rifle back at the audience. And this guy was kicked off of the range for the entire season, because that's what safety is. It's not carrying around assault rifles to public areas with the safety off, not knowing how the fuck to shoot one of them to begin with.
Right.
That's what frustrates me. We're not talking about competitive shooting, and we're not talking about we're talking about these guys, these weekend warrior guys who show up to intimidate with guns they don't even know how to handle.
There's a really good short documentary that was done. I want to say it was by the BBC or ITV. And they go out with the Michigan militia, with the wife and all these things. And they're out there, and it's like, look, if you want to have a gun club and you want to just go out and pretend like you were in the military, that's great. Have at it. Have a good time. The difference is that, I live about, let's just say I'm in the eastern part of upstate New York, and nearby is the Great Barrington in South Egremont, Massachusetts, where the last battle of the Shays Rebellion was fought. And there's a reason it was a last battle, because they killed people. And, when you come up against the government, the state or the federal government, you're going to find out where the error of your ways are. And, you are not going to be greeted by police when you do a hostage barricade, like those guys were planning in Wisconsin to take over the state house and start executing all the Democratic leaders. Democratic state senators and congressmen. You're going to come up against the FBI hostage rescue team, which is just a civilian way of saying Delta Force. And they're going to come in and they're going to show you what professionalism really is. They're going to treat you like the Taliban, or ISIS. And then it's not going to be fun and games anymore, right? It'll be a massacre. But we're going to go back to Ruby Ridge. We're going to go back to the late 90s, and now the militias are exploding. And this is why I call these people in my next book, Titus, Titus, the Trump insurgency in the United States. Trump is essentially going to be out of power Saddam Hussein, right? Question is, well, he won't be living in a small hole, but we got his sons, Uday, Qusay, and these people intend to project political power and destabilize the government, and their followers, without asking him, will start a low-grade insurgency, just like that's, Mao Zedong's first phase of revolution.
What do we do about it?
Well, the first thing you got to do about it is we have to reestablish rule of law in the United States. And the only thing that, anytime an incident happens, like with Kyle Rittenhouse, people need to come out and say the first words: this person broke the law. This person committed murder according to the law. Self-defense is when you are at home or you are in a circumstance where people come and they attack you without provocation. This man went out and started provocation. They went to a car dealership that didn't invite them, had no idea that they were there, and the police were treating them as friendlies. Actually gave Rittenhouse and them water and said to them, we appreciate what you do. No, states need to start saying,
thank you for your
that's
service.
Vigilantism.
Yeah.
And when you draw that line, look, I don't call them domestic terrorists. I wrote the textbook on terrorism, right? The Terrorist Recognition Handbook. And you know what I call them? American terrorists. Just like there are Egyptian terrorists and Saudi terrorists.
It's a great point, because you use that word domestic, it almost lightens it. It makes it like it. You're right.
No, you've got to call them out and say, the Proud Boys right now are operating essentially as a street gang. And, we don't lighten up on street gangs when they go out and they start doing drive-by shootings or when they're doing drug shootings. You got to start treating them the same way. They are straddling the line between white and gray by go using open carry laws. Okay, great, open carry. I think state legislatures ought to say, you can open carry to your heart's content. You just can't carry ammunition on you. Right?
I like that.
You know, you want to carry ammunition? Concealed carry. I have concealed carry license. You know, guess what I don't do? I don't conceal carry. Why? Because there's no circumstance now where I would need to. When I had death threats 2 years ago and I was in the South, I was gun adjacent, but I wasn't concealed carrying. These people think they are in the Wild West. And the problem is the Wild West had strict gun control whenever you went into a village.
Isn't that the irony? Like, you go into Tombstone and they were very clear in Tombstone that you're giving your damn guns up. And why did they do that? Because they knew that a bunch of idiots coming in and shooting around was bad for business. People wouldn't drink, gamble, and use enjoy the services of prostitutes. Yes.
But how prevalent was this?
The shootout at the OK Corral was gun control. It was all about
it. I wasn't aware of this because normally, you know, you see all the Western movies and everybody in town has a gun. Were there a lot of towns where they literally made you check your gun?
Most jurisdictions would make you either check your guns or secure your guns. Huh. You know, it's not like, you know, there in a lot of these movies, but a lot of this is mythology. Where you were in danger and needed a gun was where my great granduncle operated. He was with 9th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers. The most dangerous place you could be in the West is between two towns, right?
Right. Between the towns is where you could, where you could have your guns. But when you arrived at civilization, where we didn't want everyone to just be shooting everybody up,
check your guns.
That's correct. Because again, this John, I'll get you a great article on this. Because obviously, I mean, there were whole states, Wyoming comes to mind, Kentucky, and this will shock you, that banned concealed carry, right? I mean, they didn't even allow it back then. I mean, you know, what the recent Supreme Court's delivered us, its whole thing about an individual right, there was never an understanding interpretation of the Second Amendment until the Federalist Society and the NRA and people like that invented it in the 70s and 80s.
Here's something that's interesting. Because I also see these people are constantly going, Biden's coming to tape your guns. He's going to use the NFA, the National Firearms Act, to get a $200 tax. So we register your guns. No one's doing that with this current Supreme Court. I wouldn't be surprised this Supreme Court eliminates state laws prohibiting the carry of guns.
Sadly, neither would I. I think they'll take it a step further than Heller. And with Barrett there's a good chance we'll see no assault weapons bans in certain states overturned.
Every one of them in the United States will be overturned.
Right, the states that have them.
will have no right to regulate firearms.
Yep. And if you read the Second Amendment, I don't want to geek out on this too much for people. You'll see that the Second Amendment in and of itself was all about the federal government not being able to tell states that people couldn't carry firearms, you know, as part of a militia. In other words, even by the interpretations of the Second Amendment, if a state wanted to ban guns, it could. It just said the federal government could. But these guys, they don't give a damn, you know.
And Scalia upheld that. He had upheld that New York City and New York State has a right to determine how it wants to regulate firearms. But Amy Barrett, I think they're going to be in the let's strike down all prohibitions against firearms nationally.
Right. Sadly, I agree. Even if Roberts takes the common sense position, they've got 5 now that are lunatics.
Yeah, I know.
So, I mean, that's the thing. I don't know. I think I'm like you in that, Malcolm, and I don't see some large scale war, but these kinds of insurgencies, you know, which we've seen, as you pointed out, in ways in the past. I mean, this kind of rhetoric online and you know, in chat rooms on Reddit and, you know, places like that, and then on Facebook and Fox, I think we'd be crazy not to think that this kind of stuff isn't going to happen and there aren't going to be outbreaks of violence in places.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I just hope, there's a couple of things that are happening right now that I think that help defuse this a little bit. One was the length of the count in the election. Those first 4 days, there were a lot of people spoiling for a fight. Yeah. And as the election went on, as the counting went on through to that Saturday, many of them had deluded themselves that Trump was going to win and that this was Saturday was going to be like Jubilation Day and blah, blah, blah. And that took the wind out of a lot of sails. Now I have people, we're monitoring these people who are doing more planning and that they are planning for future trouble, like what happens after January 20th. And a lot of them have this insane belief that, Beto O'Rourke is being put in charge of gun control and they're going to start seizing weapons. No one is seizing weapons, right? There's a Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. That would like saying, I'm going to seize your car. Yes, they can seize your car in certain circumstances, but guess what? Kyle Rittenhouse will never again legally own a firearm, right? Even if he's acquitted, I think that they would have a hard time approving him. But things are going to change slowly. And part of the problem is these people are deluded in believing that there is a secret plan no matter what they see with their own eyes.
Yeah, that's what we are. We always do. We have a sad ending. What else you got, John? Yeah, womp womp. You got questions, John?
I was muted. Sorry. Is there anything else, Malcolm, we haven't hit on? We've been going.
I think we've run the gamut here.
Well, you know what I would ask? Actually, just the last thing I'd ask is positive stuff. You just talked about the length of the election. Do you think it's possible in some of these areas, with Biden and some of his national security team and others, whether or not we win in Georgia, which I get is a big difference, whether we win or not, but we can't know that now. Do you think that there are opportunities to diffuse some of this, to at least bring some people back into the fold?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. The biggest problem that we have right now is if the Republicans retain the Senate, then this is the second Obama administration. It's the last 4 years of the Obama administration.
Right.
Nothing is going to get done. You have the added bonus of Donald Trump will be there claiming he's running in 2024, or will prop up Donald Trump Jr. or Ivanka for 2024. And what you get is you essentially get you get the last 4 years all over again. Yeah. If the Democrats pass an infrastructure bill with the Republicans, he will claim it as his own. If, and he'll say, I instructed the Republicans to do this. If they decide they're going to go out and actually help break coronavirus, Trump will claim that all of this was done by him. Yep. He's already tried to claim it himself, to call it the Trump vaccine. The vaccines weren't even developed with U.S. government money.
Right.
So this is where the insurgency comes in. I mean, the only question is, are the Proud Boys going to be Al-Qaeda in Iraq, right? Or are they just going to be the regular Iraqi insurgents? Or are they just going to lay low? I think that Biden has an opportunity here to show real leadership to the other 60% of the country that didn't vote for Donald Trump and that need relief. It's like that comment, I want to say Ta-Nehisi Coates may have interviewed somebody who said, hey, you see that dirt road? It's always been a dirt road. I've been promised everything. No, it was Jamie Harrison said that. He says, I've been promised everything on that. You know what? It's time to build up some dirt roads into tarmac. It's time to show real change that's tangible and visible. And you know what? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris need to put their name on all of it.
Yeah, that's not a Democratic thing to do when they bet. Yes.
The precedent has been set. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden relief bill. Here's your Joe Bucks, right? Quick, somebody write this down.
Joe Bucks. That's
I know.
Yeah.
Instead of broadband, you want your Joe band in your rural
Joe
area?
Band,
We're giving you some Joe band.
Joe roads, right? Cups of Joe for everybody.
Yeah.
But we need real leadership. I mean, everyone who's the secretary, the attorney general, whoever the attorney general is, Joe Biden won't have anything to do with that person. But that person had better be a pit bull. And when they go and they start having IGs bring in that there were crimes, they've identified crimes, these violations of the Hatch Act were serious, then Joe Biden needs to say, hey, you're the Attorney General of the United States. Go do what you got to do. I'm not involved. And if that means people go to prison, well, You know, prison guards obviously need jobs so that we can keep them out of Lafayette Square.
Right. Well, and by the way, they're going to go nuts as you were saying, they're going to go nuts anyway the next 4 years. What they're doing, just looking at Trump's Twitter feed this morning, now he's claiming, I won Michigan, I won Nevada.
You're kidding me.
I kid you. It's insane. And
he won Nevada?
Wait, that is literally the latest this morning. He's added Nevada to the list now of states he won. I mean, these guys will say, they will literally say anything. They're gonna.
Correct.
They're going to lie out their asses. And this is the one thing I worry about with Biden is we do need to come together. But I hope he doesn't have a typical Democratic approach to it, thinking that our good deeds sell themselves.
No. And you know,
that's something, like you were saying, branded as Joe, but that's something we forget about a lot on our side. We've got to repeat it 10 times a day, the good things we do.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know, if I had any one thing, I would tell people, I go, look, you want to live like a millionaire? You want to live like a Republican? You got to vote Democrat. And, you know, we have bailed out every Republican president in the last half century.
That's right.
Bailed them out. And we got to keep saying that. You screwed up the government. You screwed up the government, not Wall Street. The government, we have to fix it because you're a child.
The deficit every single time.
Every time.
Right. Yeah. More debt under Republicans, more jobs under Democrats, higher stock market under Democrats.
What we will have now, and this is where you can rest easy, is my favorite comment of the week is when they nominated the senior staff. They said, you don't know who any of them are, you haven't heard from any of them, and you won't hear from any of them.
And that's the best thing. It really
stability and quiet.
Right. People that do their jobs, right? No more like Twitter trolls like, hey, Rick Grinnell seems like an asshole on Twitter. Let's put him in charge of DM. No more of that kind of stuff.
Oh no. I can tell you right now, that guy will most likely, him and Ratcliffe, all of these people that were put in for political purposes, we know that they use that intelligence for private purposes or political purposes. And that, you know, I hope the Attorney General goes, well, that's it. Some people going to jail.
We need that too. It needs to send that message. You can't do that. The final thing along those lines, would you, you know, obviously these are tougher, you know, when it comes to free speech versus sedition.
Right.
But when you've had people actively in government arguing for overthrowing our democracy, for ignoring electors, would you enforce certain sedition rules, particularly if they're calling for armed conflict?
No, okay. Well, see, that's different. Armed conflict. I mean, there was a guy. They had a Proud Boys rally in North Carolina the other day, and the guy is up on the dais. This guy wears a T-shirt that says "Pinochet did nothing wrong." Wears right-wing death squad RWDS patches on his body armor. Encourages people to start reading about how the Argentinians threw people out of helicopters over the ocean to get rid of their bodies.
And he meant read it as, hey, there's something to that.
Well, he actually made a statement the other day saying that we need to eliminate all Democrats. We need to start the elimination, the mass murder of them. Right. I see that all the time now. It's part of the QAnon canon, right? The Great Storm, the Storm and the Great Awakening, where they expect mass arrest, mass incarceration, and mass execution of Democrats.
So what do you do with that guy?
Wait, Cliff, Sidney Powell, Trump's election lawyer, the crazy one who just got fired a couple days ago.
Yeah,
her backdrop on Twitter is the storm. Other people who follow QAnon had pointed it out. There's a picture of her with somebody else in the lightning, and it literally is the QAnon storm that she was referencing. And
this is dangerous.
So what do we do with these people? Like the guy that got up and made that comment, what is that sedition in your...
No, it's not sedition until he starts putting it into practice, right? You have the right freedom of speech. It's when you say, I'm going to start killing people. See, there's a big difference between Democrats should be killed.
Right. If you were to use those words, if you were to use those words and say, I'm going to start killing people, then you have enough to arrest him on sedition? I don't know the exact law.
This is where Justice Department needs to start referring stuff down to, look, we started using the Joint Terrorist Task Forces to go after incels and kids making threats against schools. They must have rolled up a dozen of them in 2019. where cops show up at their house, seize their firearms, arrest them. Well, these threats against public order need to be done that way. And the best way to deter them is to start seizing some of their guns in relation to crimes, because those laws were voted on by their own legislatures, right? To that, when you commit a crime, you've got to take guns from people who are, felons who are accused of crimes. They hate the idea of losing their guns in any circumstance.
Oh my God, it's like being naked.
So when you want to stop somebody from being an idiot, just say, go ahead, keep talking. You lose your firearms. Yeah. And then they were like, oh no, I'm not going to say anything. Well, I don't want to stifle free speech, but I do want to stop stupid speech that leads to murder or
that's where I stand. Exactly. I'm a big believer in free speech, but I'm sorry when it crosses that line to encouraging people to commit acts of terror and then we have to draw a line somewhere.
Right.
You do, and then you have to make some examples or enforce it across the board.
All right. That's all I got.
Malcolm, as always, you have things.
You full of happy talk?
I said, Malcolm, as always, you exhaust me. So I feel totally like,
I need to go meditate and think about what Malcolm shared with us.
Well, you guys need to step it up, because I've been on Bill Maher more than I've been on your show.
What?
We're not as big time as Bill Maher. We didn't think you want to
let
come
me
up.
say, Cliff and I talk about this privately. We're not as big of attention whores as some other people. So we always, there's somebody in particular who worked for Bernie. We're not going to say who, but we always say, what would attention whore X do, the bro? And we're like, oh yeah, he'd call Malcolm every week to on the show. So we try to not use our friends too much, but
now that Malcolm just said that, okay, expect a call every sort of month to 6 weeks. Yeah. You're on, pal.
Absolutely.
That's all right. Rick Unger does it.
We'll do that.
Sounds good. Seriously, you're awesome, and thank you for taking the time and being with us, man.
Thanks, Malcolm.
It's my pleasure. Take care, guys.
We'll let you know when you're on.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh la la la. Oh my. Anyway, we love him.
Yeah, he's great.
I don't know anything else, because we sort of talked so much to Malcolm, and I don't know if there's anything I want to get into. I mean, there's lots of crazy ass stuff, but I don't want to. We're an hour and 15 minutes into this. We should probably wrap up. I think I'm about ready. I would say. So Thursday. So Thursday we are going to have somebody. Well, I say different, meaning because of all things, I have not spent enough time on LGBT issues on this show. We talk about it, but we don't have a lot of guests. We've had Dan Savage, and that was about it, actually, that I can think of. We're going to have Dana Beyer, who's a well-known trans activist, public official, talking head, you name it, in Maryland for, 20 plus years now, probably 30 years, I don't even know. But I've known Dana good 10 years. Really interesting woman. And I just thought it would be interesting for us to have a discussion about trans issues. Right? The issues are in the news so much. I'm a big fan, which gets me into trouble, of believing there are no stupid questions. So, Cliff, I'll save your ass on Thursday by I'll be the one asking the questions that get us into politically correct trouble.
Good, because I'm just going to sit there and be like, straight white guy here.
Cliff will just text me messages. Ask her about this.
So, I know. These are areas where I get scared to ask anything.
No, and that's one of the things I want to talk to her about, because I still feel that way. But
I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Yeah, no, I think it's, and I've learned this on gay stuff early on, better to have an open discussion or not, because the problem on gay stuff, but trans too, I'm sure, people think you're hiding stuff when you're not willing to talk. So like, people would ask me about stuff, and sometimes it's like, like, who's the man, who's the woman, and you're kind of going, oh God. But they were nice people who literally, that was the weird, that was a question gay people get a lot, by the way. And you just kind of try to find a nice way of going, well, and they'd be meaning it about sex, is what they mean. You're kind of going, you want me to, who do you fucking ask about sex? Really? You ask other couples, how do they do it in bed? So
that's what I mean. Like, and frankly, who's the man, who's the woman, even in our current age, maybe 20 years ago, but in our current age of where gender roles are much different. My wife knows a hell of a lot more, being a Midwesterner, me being, a little Jew boy from the East Coast. She knows a hell of a lot more about cars than I do. You know what I mean?
So you're saying your wife's the man, Cliff. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So on certain things like that, and that's the thing. Like,
but that's the answer you give. But that's the answer you give. You don't mock people, but you'd say, well, actually, just like with straight couples, gender roles have changed. First of all, just like with straight couples, guess what? Some people sexually, some of you are into some things, some of you aren't into some things. It works the same way with every couple. But also gender roles have changed. But you try to engage people and you try to have discussions. If somebody's coming from a good place, you don't shut them down because that's an offensive question. I'm very opposed to that. If somebody's coming from a good place and asking a dumb question, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why when somebody asks me if I have horns, I tell them they only come out at night. I was just going to say, I want to be honest.
There are no stupid questions to ask Cliff about being Jewish.
I mean, every once in a while when I get mad, they just start poking and then, they go back down.
That's why he has puffy hair.
Exactly. To cover the horns, I have to puff the hair up.
Exactly. All right, guys. It's we've hour 15 or so. We're going to head off and we'll see you on Thursday with Dana, unless that changes.
Yep.
But we should. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here, guys.